So if you want to make money to travel, you must show the universe that you are traveling now. Success is also consistent if you follow the pattern and the psychology of the pattern.
Basically, niches make riches, right? People have to understand that in order to build wealth and then to maintain and grow your wealth, it's very important that you have some basic understanding of where you are, where you want to go. That's the plan.
If you know that about your field, then you never have competition. You're never concerned about AI coming in and taking your job. You double down on what you truly know, and you go out there and you find those clients.
If you want to be a successful podcaster in 2025, is you have to be authentic and you have to be ethical, right? But people can now read through that. So if you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be? Welcome to today's Plan Assist podcast, where we help people make better financial decisions. And we do it by interviewing successful people who have succeeded or who are experts in a particular field to help you with making those financial decisions. We're built around three core principles: have a plan, be diversified, seek counsel. Though the conversation won't necessarily follow that order. We'll go deep into maybe one or two of them, or we'll touch on them. But primarily, it's around the guests and what they're interested in and what their expertise is. Today, I'm really excited to have Melissa Cragg. She's the owner of Bridge Valuation Partners in St. Louis, Missouri. She's a divorce mediator and a business valuation expert. Over the last 20 years, she's been helping families, attorneys, business partners resolve complex financial disputes. She works nationwide as a neutral third-party expert in areas like business valuation, pensions, income, and tracing non-marital assets. Her approach and focus is alternative dispute resolutions, using mediation and negotiation to find fair, informed outcomes without unnecessary litigation. Melissa works on bridging the gap between finance and psychology, helping clients understand both the numbers and the emotions behind them. So today I'm super excited to have you. Is there anything that I missed there?
No, that was a pretty big intro. Thank you.
I know, but I like to do that so people know kind of who are we talking to, right? I mean, so we get a little good background. And a lot of times if I just ask someone, they'll give this little short expert. So you have a lot of background, a lot of expertise. So as normal, the way I start all these podcasts off is asking the same question. So if you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be?
It would be to be financially independent from your family, from any spouse, from really anybody, and to go out and make your money in a way that you're passionate about so that it keeps on flowing and you kind of invite abundance in. So, but independently wealthy, I think would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And what would be like your kind of first thing that you would do? So if you could go back in your 23, 24, 25, what might be a strategy that at least one of the early strategies you would adopt to do that?
I think that what I actually did for most of my career was try to identify places where it was a little bit more lucrative, so there was opportunity, there was limited competition, and that maybe I had a skill set that was maybe beyond what other people had. So it was always kind of trying to arbitrage my career because, quite frankly, I went into becoming a testifying expert. And when I first understood what that was, I thought people would be crazy to do that for a living. But I was like, wait, there's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of women. It's very lucrative. I was
Uh,
like, okay, I'm gonna lean into the uncomfortable and become better at it and see if I can tolerate the uncomfortable.
That's such an interesting and good answer to start this conversation. So I can't tell you how many times on these podcasts I run into some variation of what you just said, which is basically niches make riches, right? And so that's kind of what to summarize, I'm paraphrasing to some degree, but you look for something where you can really have a niche, be an expert in, and focus on that particular part of your career.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I mean, it's more relevant now as we have like AI tools, or we have like, I mean, even people have whole AI clones of themselves. Like, it's important to ask yourself at all times, like, why do they need you in the room? Like, why is somebody in the room? Like, right now, to be a plumber or an electrician or something like that, like, you're always going to need these types of people. I think back in the day when I was looking at finance and accounting, and, everything was kind of commoditized, right? Like you flip around to different accounting firms or financial planners. Like, how do you distinguish yourself? And I was so young that all I saw were really older experts. They were doing it a certain way, had maybe not quite done it a really great way. And I was like, okay, what if you literally swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Like, what if you really drink that Kool-Aid and you're not a hired gun, and you represent the truth. Everybody knows that if they hire you, that you are, providing the best work. Like, what would happen if I did that? And I just became better at telling the truth. And I was reputable for that, like almost like a harsh truth, if you will.
Yeah.
And to me, I was like, okay, I mean, because it took about 5, 10 years to get really good at testifying in court and not like wanting to like go run to the bathroom and, get sick. I mean, it's like gut wrenching for normal people. So I was like, okay, if I can do this, then nobody else is gonna like it's gonna take 10 years for somebody to catch up with me.
Right.
And I think anywhere where you're in a space where it takes like every step you take is more steps that somebody else would have to do to catch up with you, you don't have competition. Like, it's to the extent that there are not a lot of women who have done this job, much less for 20 plus years. So I'm ahead of all of that. But at the end of the day, the court recognizes me as a reputable truth teller.
Right.
And that gets me a lot further than, just sort of taking everybody's money and making sure that I make good money for each case. Like, that was never the goal.
When I started down this path of this podcast, I did a whole bunch of research, like everything. I'm a financial advisor, so obviously I did a bunch of research. And one of the things that came out over and over again, if you want to be a successful podcaster in 2025, is you have to be authentic and you have to be ethical, right? But people can now read through that. For years and years, people just sick and tired of being sold and being part of someone else's sales process. They want someone who's going to tell them the truth, tell them what they need to do it in a loving, productive way, but you're still not there to sell them something. You're there to help them go from here to there.
Right. Right. And I mean, even when we started our podcast in the pandemic, it was just to like, we couldn't leave the house, and whenever we would do our marketing, like how I grew up marketing and learned from, my predecessors was you took people out to lunch, you spent several hours hanging out with them, and you hope for the next year that they would potentially call you. So when we did the podcast, it was just like, well, I can still talk to people. I can still talk about, like kind of nerdy things that, and maybe people will like it, maybe they won't. And our podcast was like a total accident. We had a really famous attorney who is like an attorney to the stars in Atlanta, Georgia. His name's Randy Kessler. And he called me and he's like, hey, Melissa, we're going to be talking about Zoom trials. Have you done any Zoom trials? And I was like, yeah, actually, I have. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to write an article and we're going to be on Court TV.
Oh my
He's like, I'm going to
gosh.
come on your podcast. And I was like, I don't have a podcast. I didn't say that though. I did not say that. I just said, okay, when are we doing this interview? And he's like, I think 2 weeks from now. Are you gonna be ready? Yep. And so I looked at one of our young staff and I was like, we need a podcast. And they're like, well,
That is
what's
so
the
great.
name? Like, oh, this is gonna be so much fun. I was like, no, we're gonna call it valuationpodcast.com. That's it. And they're like, okay, that's not how we do podcasts. And I'm like, we're going to do them for 30 to 45 minutes. They're like, yeah, no, that's not how we do podcasts. I was like, who cares? This is how I want to do it.
That's awesome. What a great story. So that launched your podcast. And who's primarily the people that you talk to on the podcast? Is it small business owners? Is it people going through a divorce?
Yeah.
Or is it some combination of all?
I would say for the most part, we try to interview people that really have also kind of really laser focused experience. So like, cryptocurrency fraud or, financial SARS, like
Okay.
any sort of unique thing. Because what we want is at the end of the day, you would have to pay $300 to $500 to speak to somebody like this and talk to them about what they know. And so I was like, you know, if we're going to just talk, and a lot of times it was just things that I was interested in. Like if I didn't do commercial litigation or if I didn't do certain types of forensic work, I'm like, let me pick your brain. Like, how does this work? And so a lot of ours, I would say, would be more on the very educational, traditional, in the weeds kind of financial things
Okay.
based around valuation-ish, but even more recently, it's also lifting up female voices and minority voices and people who haven't had the capability to be on, national platforms. But at the end of the day, we had people saying, I learn a lot from your podcast. I'm like, great, that's exactly what
Yes.
we're here for.
And, and that's kind of why I started it, because I've been super fortunate to work with really wealthy people and helping wealthy people get rich or keep their money. But what I haven't had the opportunity to do is kind of work with that middle group or kind of down. And I'm like, I need to have a podcast that shares some of those strategies, some of those principles that that particular group has kind of naturally, right? I mean, so most of them all have a plan. They're all diversified, or at least later in their careers are diversified. Maybe early in their investment careers, they'll be concentrated into their small business, et cetera. But they have a strategy to get diversified. And then the thing that that group is really good at is seeking counsel. And I use the word seeking counsel, but I get feedback. It's, they'll say it should be something else, seek advice or input. But what I mean by that is people who have accumulated a decent amount of wealth almost naturally get input with a bunch of people in a curious way, right? So they don't call like a salesperson to sell them something. They'll call you and say, "Hey, Melissa, hey, I have a friend who has a business who is getting divorced. What do you think?" You get this
Yeah.
opinion. In reality, it's them or it's like a relationship or something, but they approach everything from okay, I need to be curious. And the bigger the financial decision is, the more input they get, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I mean by those three kind of principles. And so that's how I launched. But this is, I interview people who kind of fit into one of those really, really easily, or someone who kind of does all three of them.
Well, and big business owners or even really intelligent people in our field that have like 20, 30 years of experience, what I was noticing, like our podcast really, when we created it, I just wanted to be creating video. And I felt like I was always doing like my own video by myself. And I was like, if we do this video podcast, I could be interviewing people. And at the end of the day, I testify in court. I have to communicate things in a very simple way. And so like it's a sales thing in a low key way because if you hear me talk about the information that I know or the person that I'm interviewing, like it actually was more engaging and entertaining and it was still on video. It was still creating content at that time. We just wanted content for YouTube, right? I didn't even listen to podcasts. I still don't listen to podcasts. And so I just wanted video content to be able to push out so that when people were searching online because they couldn't go outside, that they could find me and they would then, come and Zoom meet with me. Like everything changed from the pandemic on. And everything had to change from a sales perspective, and big business owners, that's the biggest thing is they wouldn't put themselves on video. They're like they have this reputation, like they're just known. They're like almost sort of untouchable. And so it was like kind of bringing some of these voices out
Yeah.
that didn't quite get out into video. And they're like, I don't know about this video thing. I'm like, oh, you'll be fine. You'll love it.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that people, what I have found, and the people listening to this podcast is when I kind of kick it off, or I have people kind of listening to my podcast, I watch tons of podcasts. That's really the only, that's really my primary tool for getting information. So I get in a bubble, right? And I totally know that I'm in this bubble because I'm picking and choosing what I want to watch. But the one thing that I do notice is it gives me a chance to meet people. And so when I had a executive coach early on in this, and I started talking to him about this, and he says, Tim, he says, don't worry about how many people because we measure against the number of people watching. If you only have 20 people, he goes, if someone called you up and said, come out and give a 20-minute, half an hour presentation at the local chambers meeting, would you go? And I'm like, of course. And he goes, my point. He says, so don't worry about necessarily the number, but I have found it to be such a valuable referral program. Like this is I refer people that I've interviewed on my podcast because now I'm not just giving them a name. I can give them a 30, 40, 50 minute interview, and then they can go and say, yeah, I like that person. I'll reach out to them, you know? So I found it so helpful in that sense because my clients are constantly looking for, hey, I'm getting a divorce. What's the value of my small business? You know, what's the I need to give money to the kids. There's just all kinds of stuff. But when I interview people, I get a sense of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age, you can ask any question to ChatGPT and it can give you an answer.
Right.
But when somebody tells you, and you're hearing the validity of their information or it resonates with somebody, I think that that's just a different ball game. And so, as we progressed in the podcast or any of these interviews, it started to become more important of who I interviewed, right? And it became more important to not just have like talk about something, but to talk about something that was substantial, that almost giving away your knowledge, because you give away all the knowledge, you still know that at times they need you in the room. Like in what I do, if you want to sue somebody or you want to get divorced and you need to present a number in court, you have to have an expert witness. You can't testify to it. Even if you wanted to testify to some like your own court case and you were suing some other company, you cannot testify to it. You have to have an expert witness that either has credentials or experience or know-how. And so for me, it was like I could give away exactly how to do evaluation. I started to realize nobody cared how to do the valuation. They cared, could you do the valuation and then testify in a way that is clear and convincing to the trier of fact, which is the judge or a jury. And at the end of the day, I realized I can give away all the information. Like, how do you do a business valuation? How do you look at a marital waste claim? How do you trace an asset? Like all of these things, because if they needed it, they would still need me in the room to show up and to quantify it because people second guess ChatGPT. They second guess the internet, right? They want an expert
And
in the
should.
room.
And should.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
But AI is getting a lot better, and we cannot think that it's not going to be the equivalent of a person who has 50 years of experience. And so at the end of the day, can AI go in and testify in court? Well, in the future, probably it's possible,
right.
right?
No question.
So I have to see, so we also negotiate transactions. Well, those are business person to business person. I'm working with, big time business owners that want to negotiate themselves. Okay, so I'm in the background, I'm coaching them, I'm getting them prepared to do the negotiation. But each time they don't want to talk to AI, they don't want to, read it. They need the sanity check of, like if I want to go invest my money, I can go log into anywhere and go start investing. If I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a proper fashion, I might want to talk to Tim. I might want to have that experience that's going to guide me. And that's where at the end of the day, the people that want your information are going to consume it. I mean, we give away things and sell things for under $100, guides to negotiation, templates to go make a settlement offer. All of these things are available if you think you can do it. And it will get you to a certain place where then you come in and you're like, yeah, I took it as far as I could. And now I'm going to need your help. If you know that about your field, then you never have competition. You're never concerned about AI coming in and taking your job. You double down on what you truly know and you go out there and you find those clients. Like I'm getting clients off of TikTok right now. I mean, it's crazy. You have to go wherever that is. I sometimes wonder if people on LinkedIn truly understand how much business I get from TikTok and not necessarily
they
from
do not.
LinkedIn. No.
No, they do not. I've messed with LinkedIn for 10 years. They do not understand it. They don't understand. And X is becoming also the other kind of driving platform. It's not there today, but it is starting to get some traction and getting some people on there because it's becoming kind of it's not becoming the connecting platform, but it is becoming the news platform, right? So they're kind of breaking the news. And then as time goes, we link it up, right? Here's the
Yeah.
part that I find almost everyone misses though when it comes to using professionals. It's the emotional aspect. So when I introduced you, you were taught one of the things in your introduction was the psychology and the emotional aspects of it. People so underestimate that part of it. I grew up on the floor of the commodity exchange as a trader, and I made a bunch of money, lost a bunch of money. When it was all over, I was about flat. But one thing that I learned during that decade trading was it wasn't the strategies it was about 90% emotion. And the guys who could make a lot of money, their emotions were different than mine. It was fascinating. I had really good friends. I'd say, "What made you do that at that time?" They can't even explain it. It's emotions, it's their psychic of their kind of how they see stuff. But that applies to trading, it applies to disputes, it applies to marriages, it applies to everything.
Yeah, I mean, negotiation, any sort of dispute resolution, conflict, like you're
Yes.
dealing with conflict, part of it is actually intuition and pattern recognition. And,
Oh,
the
that's really good.
interesting pieces are that, everybody thinks, well, my divorce is completely different or my business is completely different. There's patterns to all of these negotiations. Like we wrote an entire book called Anchor the Deal on the negotiation strategy behind a closed negotiation, which is two divorcing people. You can't just decide you want to walk away, right? If you go and buy a car and you're in an outside negotiation, you just be like, well, I'm just not going to buy this car. I'm going to go somewhere else and buy the car. Tim, I don't want to work with you. I'm going to go work with somebody else. When you're getting undivorced or like even business divorces, unpartnered, you can't walk away from the deal. And so there's a pattern and a psychology around that type of negotiation that is drastically different than if you had an open market negotiation. And so it was almost like once I started to see the patterns, I
Hmm.
kind of looked around and I was like, how is nobody else seeing these patterns? Well, there's no benefit for them to see the patterns because they weren't thinking that there would be one, but they're also not understanding that we're negotiating in a closed system and that it makes all the difference that the pattern is almost consistent every single time. So I kind of sat back and I was like, well, then the success is also consistent if you follow the pattern and the psychology of the pattern. Now, this doesn't necessarily work if you could, like, if you go to buy a company and you negotiate the deal, you can still walk away, right?
Right.
So
No.
that is, again, an open market that you could leave, and there's other providers that you can go get service from. Anytime where, like, you and your partner want to separate, you guys are going to have to figure it out until you figure it out. And so that's a different pattern in psychology that we started to develop. And I was like, hold on, it might not be as hard as people think if they follow the pattern. And then from a business valuation standard, I was like, okay, well, if everybody can be heard, if everybody can say their piece, like, I think it's going to be worth this much, I think it's tanking, like, then everybody feels heard. When I present the number, they're like, okay, I might not totally love that number, but that's reasonable. That's rational. That makes sense based on the facts and circumstances of the situation. So it's a very different negotiation pattern.
I'll bet you have your biggest challenge is with that person who comes from business, right? Because they're used to open. Like I would be that person, right? I'm used to being able to walk away all the way up until 2 minutes before closing, right? So
Yeah.
then if you put me into a closed view, I you would have to really coach me, right?
The interesting part is it's almost my specialty that I work with, more business owners, somewhat controlling, somewhat domineering. And the interesting dynamic is when I come in, we're not then, like everybody looks up to them, like they're the smartest in the room, da da da. When I come in, we're equal. So you're not going to be able to manipulate me with the numbers. I'm going to expose because I really don't, I kind of love conflict. Like I don't shy away from it, but I believe that the truth, if you really speak from what you want, what you believe it's worth, and you speak from the truth, that is how you're going to get what you want more often. And so I just level the playing field for everyone and come in as a financial mediator and say, listen, I know you're saying that this isn't making any money, but if we look over here at this bank statement, could you answer this question? So it's just food for thought. It's just leveling the playing field and saying, hey, you're not coming in as the smartest in the room, but you're also going to be. And what do smart people want? We want to be around other smart people. Like we want to be able to be there and have these in-depth discussions
Yeah, that's right.
about, complex financial matters and not look at somebody and feel like they're glazing over from it. So that actually became where I really focused on is like I'm going to litigate and really mediate high dollar litigation that lawyers and judges don't understand anyway, right? So you have and a lot of my clients that do the joint mediation are bankers, they're investment bankers, they're financial analysts, they're CFAs. We know a CFA is smarter than any other credential, right? So at the end of the day, we're meeting like-mindedness
Yeah.
and we're saying, hey, you're not going to get screwed by some rogue valuator to come in and say your business is worth 100 million. So simmer down. Let's talk about the real numbers and how this would look if you bought your partner out, right? I work for a lot of businesses where the partners might still be friends, right? Like just true business partners. Like we were friends, we came together and I want to go do something else. They don't want to negotiate with each other. They don't want to leave that sour taste in their mouth. They want to hire me and say, "Okay, let's work together, one valuation." And I say, "Well, at the point that I present the valuation, I present it to you both at the same time." And they're like, "Oh, but what if it's not what I want?" It's going to be what is more correct than not. It is going to be more reasonable than if you both hired somebody and somebody goes high and somebody goes low, and then now we're fighting, right? Like that's an old school business tactic that doesn't work when you're in a closed system. That works when you're on the outside and you could go sell to anybody else. You can say, you know what? My business is worth 20 million. Well, how much EBITDA do you have? 500,000. We're like, I'm not paying 20 million for 500,000 of cash flow. Somebody might, right? That's an open system. Somebody might buy that, not in a closed system. The closed system, you just can't make up numbers and you can't lowball numbers. It will make everybody feel worse at the end, and it actually doesn't help negotiations.
And then that applies to partners, right? Applies to divorces,
Yeah.
applies to deaths where the spouse needs to show up. I see this a lot where sometimes it's the wife, sometimes it's the husband who knows the finances, and then the one who knows the finances passes, and the other person's standing there like, well, what do I do, right? And all of a sudden, you have to come up with some evaluations, and even on smaller scales, right? You got to come up
Yeah.
with evaluation on, well, houses are a little easier. Well, I
Well,
say
but
they're
if you look at,
easier, they're really not because they are if you're going to sell them. If you're not
yeah,
selling them, you still got to come up with some number that everyone can disagree with.
where you see it more often in estate planning, which is probably what you will see a lot, is that a lot of the old trusts that were created, they put all the assets into a trust and then they equally gave those assets to their four children.
Exactly.
And now everybody dies, and the four kids are like, wait a second, I run one business, I run the other business. Johnny hasn't done anything for the past 20 years, and Sally is, just the secretary. So we don't think that this is fair. We're coming in and saying, okay, maybe we can exchange some of these businesses, but what is the reality of it? And sometimes we
Oh
have
my
one
gosh,
business and
that
we
would
want
be
to sell it.
complicated.
It's very complicated, but now
Yes.
three kids don't want to sell it and one kid just wants their money out, right?
Right.
So we've had this happen where everybody's positioning, well, what do you think it's worth? Well, what do you like? We ruin families with some of these structures of estate planning, and then I come in and have to try to fix it. We had one where three kids and they thought, you know what, Johnny wants to buy this business, but he wants to get it for a steal. I reviewed the valuation with each kid separately on the same day because God forbid they were going to go talk. So it was like one after the other. None of them wanted to keep it. They all were like, sell it. We'll split the amounts, but they wanted to know the dollar amount to see if they would buy it, right? And so that's a lot of positioning around numbers. There's so much fear around what's that number going to be, and and
So
and
much.
I don't know, like I don't know if I want to handle it, so I just want to make up numbers. That's where we're coming in. And I mean, couples and divorces are a whole different ballgame, but we see a lot of family disputes. Like even right now, we're in one, and they're like, we would just like to fix this before Christmas, before Thanksgiving. And we just want to have dinner together because this has ruined the family for the past year. And I'm like, there's not a lot of people coming in as a financial mediator for these families who have, you see it all the time, who have tons of property, farms, buildings, and then you have the operating entity and they're renting back and forth. And the parents, like all of these things. And they're like, how do we transfer this in a tax effective way? And that is fair. Everybody loves the word fair. In the court system, fair is the F word. This is not, there's never anything that's going to be fair. It's going to be reasonable. It's going to be rational. It's going to make sense for the family dynamic or the situation. But fair is nobody, ideally, the best values, everybody walks away somewhat unhappy, right? Because you didn't get it, the high number. You didn't get the low, get it for nothing. You got it somewhere where you both could walk away and say, that's
I
probably
can live with it.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Or you
And
take
then
it to market. I
And then
mean,
they kind of got to live with each other. On the other one goes off and makes a bunch of money because he does it. And it's, we got ripped off. In reality, it's not, to your point. It's not fair. It's more what's reasonable, and you still have to come up with a number in the closed system to come up with that, because the person who organized everything, it was genius, but he or she spent
yeah.
30 or 40 years building it, and then all of a sudden they want to take this 30 or 40 year empire and break it up in 3 or 4 months. It's just very hard and very
Yeah,
difficult.
the best analogy that they teach you at the very beginning when you do mediation
Uh-huh.
training there, and I forget who wrote, there is somebody who wrote about this, but it's like right now you and I are going to agree to split an orange. And one way you can do it is just cut it right down the middle and you get half and I get half. And that might be the fair way to do it, right? And we even weigh them. And so they're perfectly even. Or what if you sell orange juice and I sell pies? I want the orange zest of the outside and you want the orange middle of the inside. So wouldn't it make sense that you keep the whole middle and I keep the whole outside? Because for our own interests, our own positions, that is the most ideal. I can do something with it, right? I don't care about the middle of the orange. Now, that is not fair. That is not equal, but that is the most rational, reasonable way that everybody actually gets what they want and what they desire, as opposed to. So a lot of mediation is, what do you want to stay in that house, or do you want a safe place? Do you want a comfortable place? Do you want a nice yard? So we start to talk about like what it looks like, not position, I need that house. I have to stay in that house because that's what, ba, 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 ba. Well, we're going to have to sell the house and you're not, neither one of you are going to get it. So a lot of that is creative thinking, is, probably what you do a lot during the day as well, which is coming up with unique ways to solve very complex problems. But there is no guidebook to
That's right.
mediation, other than understanding the patterns of how people negotiate, how people manipulate, and how you can prevent it. Those are the patterns.
So what I really think, and back to kind of when I wrote the book and talked about kind of plan assist, have a plan B, diversified seed counsel. When you get to the seed counsel piece, the important thing for people to understand when you're starting to divide up a particular asset is, and I run into this constantly, is people will go get input from somebody, and or they'll get input from ChatGPT, or they'll get input from their neighbor, or get input from their friend, and that's all okay. There's nothing wrong with any of that. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not taken back by it at all. But people have to understand that there's a difference between just kind of throw out some opinion and then the professional paid for advice. And this is the piece that I'm a big AI fan and think it's going to really go way down this path. But there's a difference between paid for advice and non-paid for advice. I kind of call it formal and informal. And what I mean by that is if I just have a conversation with you about investments, okay, and we're at a cookout, well, I'm going to tell you whatever. Okay, we'll talk about some stocks and go to, but I have no real professional liability when I have that conversation, right? Because you can do it or not do it, do whatever you want with it. Go tell 50 people that this is the best idea in the world. But whether you do it or not, I can step away. Now, if you become my client or become your client and they sit down on my, all of a sudden everything changes because now I have professional liability responsibility, right? I have liability and responsibility that goes with that. So all of a sudden, my advice will feel and look a little bit different. And I try to explain to people when they're getting that advice, the reason it looks different is because of that. They don't know that though. It's really interesting until I explain it to them. Some of them will get it. A lot still don't. They still take the neighbor's advice and my advice as the same. And I've said the neighbor's advice is good advice and my advice is good, but they're different advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what people have in the past is that professionals have allowed people to want a person who solves their problem, right? And
That's
I
right.
think the mediation training has helped me understand that I should be presenting options, right? Based on your circumstance and situation, you have options, A or B, choose this or choose that. And at the end of the day, you need to become educated enough to know that that's the plan that you commit to. And so I think it's really shifting professionals to say, because a lot of times what mediation training showed me is that I am biased. I'm biased about how I think somebody should rent versus own. I'm biased if they should lease a car or buy a car. I'm biased by my own personal preferences, my own personal history of
And so am
money
I.
trauma,
I agree
of
100%.
my family, of,
Yes,
like we never got to use the fancy stuff. So now I don't have, like, whatever it is, you come with all of these
that's
biases
right.
about money. And it's always about money. So when you're coming into these situations where we are advisors, I'm coming in and saying, hey, you can do whatever you want. Like even whenever I am negotiating for my businesses, like I value them for 10 years and then I help them negotiate their sale. I tell them, I'm not getting paid based on you selling your company. If at the literal closing desk table, it is not the right deal, you walk away. You trust your instincts and you walk away, not because an advisor wants you to continue, because you trust that the people around you are advising you of your options, right? And they are not tied to the financial results of those options. So that is a game changer in a lot of different situations that I don't like. I used to like, this is how I was able to testify for so long. Is my mantra when I go in is not my circus, not my monkeys. Like, this is not my problem. It's not my children, it's not my spouse, it's not my family. Like, I'm going in, I'm doing the best work that I can to justify the truth, to tell the truth, to show the true value. But at the end of the day, I don't win cases, I don't lose cases. I provide information for the judge or the jury to determine, or a business owner to determine. So it's really, we should be empowering the people and the business owners to understand their options and then to look back and say, okay, well, what is your feeling for it? Do you want to invest in bonds? Do you want to invest in the crypto? Like, it shouldn't be my perspective of crypto. It should be, what is your risk relationship? What is your basis of what you have to offer or to lose? Right. And so that's where I think we bring more to the table of like, I just want to tell you, you got three or four options. Now, what path would you like to go down? Let's really go down and develop a strategy.
And the way that I do it is similar to that. It's just a little bit different because I'm a financial advisor. Is what I try to tell people. Charlie Munger was doing a shareholders meeting for Berkshire Hathaway, and they asked him what was the best financial advice you ever got. Financial lesson, I think, is the word that they used. And he quickly answered the question, and it was invert everything. So what he meant was he was a weatherman in the Army, and he would give the pilots advice. And he found that giving them great advice that the weather's good and didn't have much. But if he told them that there's a thunderstorm coming in, there's ice, that was what he learned the most. So he took that to his real estate career. He took it to Berkshire Hathaway. And what I did from that little piece is when I talk to clients is I'm like, okay, here's what we really have to understand. What's best case scenario in this investment? It goes up tenfold. What's worst case? Goes to zero. What's likely case? Goes up 10%. Okay, now which do you live with, right? In a real estate, now that's an aggressive example, but you could use a real estate deal. I'll say, okay, well, it goes up 20%, goes down 10%, goes probably up 5%. How do you live with that? And that's what I try to help people really grasp when I'm helping them. And I said, that's what you're getting input from, not just from me. You're calling Melissa and saying, what is the really best case scenario of this asset? What's kind of worst case? And then what's really likely, right? And that's really how I drive my conversations.
It's so on point with when I'm mediating like a big dispute
Mhm.
or anything. I learned this the hard way, but I'll tell you how it works. So when I have two people and they both have an offer, right? And they're over here and they're over here. And I went in and I was like, you know what? And it was really only like $50,000. Like, this was millions of dollars and they were $50,000 apart. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great. We didn't even think we could settle it. So I went into both sides, and this is caucus style mediation. People aren't in the same room. You're
Uh-huh.
over in one and then you go to the other. So I went into one room and I was like, you know what? You guys are really getting close. This is great. Give me your best offer, and I'm going to go to the other side, and then their best offer, and I think we're going to be there. So I go to the other side and I'm like, hey, give me your best offer. And it wasn't just dollars, it was a lot of other nuanced things, right?
Yeah.
And I go to the other side and I was like, you know what? We're close. Let's go. I go back into the rooms and they both went further away. And I was like, what the heck are you guys doing? And they're like, well, you said we were close. So I just assumed that I was giving up too much.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
next day,
Oh,
I get the same
wow.
situation. Next week, I get the same situation, right? And I go in and I was like, guys, I wish you guys were closer. Like, I don't know if we're going to get this done today, but like, give me your best offer. I'll go see what I can do to the other side. I go to the other side. I tell them the same thing. I don't think it's going to get done today. Like, you guys are too far apart. When I tell you they legit gave offers that were almost to the dollar the same because they both got better with their offer. I've never gone and done it the other way again.
What a
And so
great
that's the
lesson.
psychology
Oh
of
my
when we
gosh.
think that we're getting screwed in it. Oh, and that's a psychology of anchor the deal. When you anchor it, you anchor your best offer.
Yeah.
Well, if somebody like the other day we got an offer and my guy was just like, I'll take it. And I was like, okay, so you're not going to take it. And he's like, that's better than I thought I could get. And I was like, if you go back and say, I'll take it, the other guy's going to feel like they got screwed. Now, you're not going to negotiate the price, but you're going to negotiate the terms. You're going to go back and you're going to ask for a little bit more and you're going to negotiate the terms. And then they're going to feel like they did a good negotiation. At the end of the day, if I go to you and say, Tim, can I buy those earphones off of you for 20 bucks and you hand them to me? I was like, well, shit, I
Should have
could have
done
said
10.
$15.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
maybe they're not even worth $20. Like I feel like I got screwed based on the dynamics of the negotiation and being truthful. Like that was more than I had expected. But at the end of the day, this is a game. This is a performance. And the moment you don't believe it's a performance and a game is when you will lose. And so you have to go back. We had to go back to the buyer and say, thank you for that offer. You are so close, right? But it's just not going to cut it. So here are some other deal terms we can throw in. Can you give us, just a little bit better on the price? They came back. It didn't matter what the better was. It didn't matter what the better, 10,000, 20,000, a
That's right.
million. Whatever it was, we were going to say yes at that point. And so they came back and they're like, the best we can do is $50,000 more. Like, we really want this. Like, this is the best. We want to work with this guy. This is the best company. My guy's like flipping out. He's like, you got $50,000 more. He's like, well, it's absolutely a yes. And we still went back and said, great. I think we have a deal. Let's negotiate like his contract because you also always negotiate the owner's contract at the very end.
Exit.
Like, and so we negotiated that contract. Everybody, you know what most people love? They love the negotiation. They love to feel like they won. They love to feel like they got a deal, right? And so if you don't allow them that joy and you rob them of the joy, you're actually starting the entire partnership on the wrong feet. Like now everybody's going to remember what happened in the negotiation. That also means they're going to remember when you do dirty negotiation and they might still do the deal, but the day after the deal, they don't trust you. It's not a good situation. It's uncomfortable. So there's a lot that goes in for the lower middle market when you're buying, under 20 million, under 40 million of companies. It's a different dynamic. These business owners want to negotiate with each other because they are like-minded,
Right.
right? But they don't realize that they are negotiating their life, their baby, and it's an emotional process. And guess what? You're not the best one in the room. Now, I let them start the negotiations, but then at all times they defer to me and say, Melissa, could you maybe answer that question? Absolutely. Let me take it from here, right? So,
And it goes to the emotional aspect of where you need to have an unbiased, unconnected person. So I'll get these people that'll say my parents say or something like that. I say you need someone unbiased. And the situation I'll get into that was such a good story and so example. I hope people will take note of that story you gave about the coming together, and it's important to understand the psychology of negotiation. Where I'll come into that is people call me up and say, I feel really, really good about this investment. I want to put X amount of dollars in. I say, that's okay. But of course you feel good about the investment because you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't. I mean, so everything that you see about that, but that investment could go down 50% because of these 8 or 9 things. Now, it
yeah.
probably isn't. It's probably going to go not what you think, it's tenfold, but maybe it goes up twofold. But my point is people need a reality check and they need to feel like they're part of the process. And they never want to feel like they're overpaying or, to your point, or
Well,
getting ripped off.
even in your example, it's confirmation bias. And what we have to be
Yes.
mindful of is when we're going into ChatGPT, we're like, is this a great investment? Like we're seeking out, we're Googling, like, is this is gonna hit forever? Like we're actually talking to our family, we're talking to other people, we're like, this is gonna be a great investment, isn't it? we're already setting it up that we want validation for our decision, and yet we're not seeking out anything that doesn't confirm it.
And by
And
the way,
so,
ChatGPT will give you confirmation bias. If you go to ChatGPT and you're not good at prompts, I'm really, really into AI and the prompting and all that. And
yeah,
people don't realize that if you don't ask the question correctly, you will literally get the wrong answer. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client come in, he was using one of the AI programs, and it came back and he put his Hope and portfolio in, and it said, I am very well diversified. I look fantastic. And I looked at his 401k and I said, but you're 40 years old and you're invested 50-50. And he goes, yeah, but look at what ChatGPT did. Look at everything. I said, okay, here's how to ask that question. Say, hey, ChatGPT, I am 40 years old. I make $300,000 a year and I have my house almost paid for, and I'm invested in a 50-50 portfolio. Is that okay? Boom. It came right back and said, absolutely not. You're way too conservative, right? It's how you ask the question that gives you that almost everyone's confirmation bias, to be honest with you.
yeah, because that's what
We
I
want to
mean.
agree.
We want to agree, and we want it. We've already made that decision. We want other people to validate it. And
Yeah.
so in my mind, if you empower the individual with knowledge, then they can then sit back and say, okay, what makes sense to me? Right? What feels good to me? Trust your instincts, trust your decision making process. But with money, typically we have our CPA in our ear, we have our parents. That's a big factor
Yeah.
of how your parents invested or what your parents did. Then you talk to your friends, like money is a little bit taboo. So you're getting this input from people that are very closely, but they have their opinions about, like, people are like, crypto bad. Crypto is not bad. Like, none of these things are bad.
Or
It's the
both. You have
perception.
crypto good, crypto really
Correct.
bad, crypto really good. I mean,
Right. And it also is like, again, with investments, it's your risk. Are you risk averse? Like, is
yes.
it going to make you not be able to sleep at night if you're more aggressively invested? Okay, well, maybe you stay conservative. Maybe you're going to have to work harder. Like, I would like to make more money in the internet in the next 5 years that my parents made their entire life. That is possible, that it never was possible before. But if I talk to my dad like that, he's going to be like, you're crazy. You're
Yeah.
putting all your eggs in the wrong basket. And that might be true. So there needs to be a balance in what that looks like. And we become the balance as advisors or consultants so that, like, because at the end of the day, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you value it. I don't care if you fight with your family. I don't care if you guys disagree. If you want a different result, then you have to take a different action. And that is the harder part, is that the people don't want to take the different action. Like, you can't get the same results from doing the same things. You have to do something different. And that's usually where I come in, is to kind of stir it up and say, hey, let's look at this completely different and let's get to a solution. Even with the families that I work with, I'm like, you know what? We're talking a lot of money. I don't feel like that's the biggest issue. And they would sit down and be like, no, what the biggest issue is I want to be able to sit down to a holiday dinner and have my family all together and love each other. Well, guess what? Some of these options of getting the best and highest number, it doesn't matter if that's the most ideal option. That's not going to accomplish that goal. That goal is going to take a different psychology and a methodology. And when I tell them how to do it, just that we talked about some of this, they're like, oh, like, it's literally a chess game where you're making one move at a time and making sure that each person has the capability to be heard, to talk about their issues, and then you come in as the expert. Like, it works amazingly well. It's just that they can't envision it because they're old school, trying to negotiate like a used car
And
salesman.
they can't do it themselves. The piece
No,
that I try to explain to people, and again, I don't care either. You and I have the same attitude. When people ask me, should I buy a car, not buy a car? I'll say, it's your money. You understand? It's completely your money. I'm not trying to say yes or don't do this or do that. I want to get the best outcome for what you're trying to get to. And so when you ask me about, should I buy crypto? Well, my answer is always, it depends, right? Because how much money do you make? How much money do you have? What's your opinion? What's your significant other think of that? I mean, there's just an enormous number of kind of things that come into play on any kind of a decision. And I think that's the piece that I want to kind of leave this on. And I want you to kind of do a closing is People have to understand that in order to build wealth and then to maintain and grow your wealth, it's very important that you have some basic understanding of where you are, where you want to go. That's the plan. You want to be diversified to some degree. It doesn't mean you'll be diversified your whole investment career, but you want to have a strategy to get diversified. And then lastly, and what we talked about here on this call in the last 50 minutes is you want to seek input, seek guidance from a variety of sources and from professionals that are as unbiased as possible, even though we always bring bias, right? How would you finish this? Because it's been fantastic. And then how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would go even a little bit more spiritual because my journey with abundance and how to create flow of money is that it has to, like I grew up in you collect it, you put it in the bank and you watch it, right? You may not use it, you may not enjoy it, you may not do all the things, and then I had one parent that left this world probably much earlier than they should have. And they never got to, like my parents never got to enjoy it together. And from my standpoint, abundance in my spiritual journey has been that you have to be the abundance, that you have to exhibit the abundance. So if you want to make money to travel, you must show the universe that you are traveling now. You must show that, like my favorite example is that you have to be the money in abundance, but you have to assume that there's $1 million check. It's already been written to you and it just has been deposited into the bank, but it's going to clear in 5 days. So you're already immensely wealthy. Like you have to be that wealthy person. But what are you going to do for the next 5 days when you don't actually have it, but you know that it's already there? Those are the actions and the steps that you should be taking at all times to be the abundance, to look around and see that money is not the only abundance. Health, family, travel, things that you love are abundantly around you. And so for me, it is being the mirror and the example of the abundance and knowing that when money flows, it will continue to flow. So I have to let it flow in, which means I got to let a lot of it flow out. I got to hire people, I got to
Yeah.
have people and teams, and I have to put my money in flow so that it keeps on creation. So that's kind of my viewpoint. For a lot of what we do, our website is valuationmediation.com. It makes sense. We have never been very complicated in our naming of things, but we really try to come in the middle of people who are in conflict. And the conflict is usually around a business valuation. And we just try to do it in a little bit different way so that at the end of the day, you all go back, you have a nice dinner, you enjoy Thanksgiving, and the money wasn't the thing that broke you because it really at the end of the day is not really what it's like that's not true abundance in its fullest form.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much that was a great way to end this. And you can do national valuation. So it doesn't matter where they are. I saw where you were across the country. So it's
Yeah.
not geographically located wherever you're at listening to this. If you need help with an evaluation, reach out and see if you're a fit
Yeah.
with evaluation, business evaluate. No.
It's valuation with no E, just
Okay.
valuation mediation. And we are like located in St. Louis, but yes, we do a lot of Zoom. Like we get people like, quite frankly, people who don't get along don't want to necessarily be in the same room together. So we do a lot of Zoom. We do a lot
Awesome.
online.
Yeah.
And obviously Bridge Valuation is my company address, but you can Google Melissa Gregg and you'll find me. You'll find my real telephone number and you can reach out, text me or call me. But at the end of the day, you got to find out if that's the way that you want to go about it because could AI do your valuation? Sure. Will you know if it's right? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. And then it doesn't have all those other things we talked about. So
Yeah.
like and subscribe. So if you do like these, please do. And then also, if you have any opinions or want to comment on it, we'd love to hear from you either way. So with that, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking some time and
Thank you, Tim. I
you
appreciate this
were awesome.
opportunity too. Yeah.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate you.